It's Monday, January 9th. And what that means is that we are live with our inaugural Parent Tween Connection Roundtable. Now, if you've heard me describe it, what is a roundtable? It's like a learning summit, but Parent Tween style. We're coming to you live with professionals who we know and love, like Ashley Jordan from My Education Connections. And if you are not yet in our Facebook group, if you're seeing us on YouTube or you're seeing us on LinkedIn, if you come on over to Facebook and you join our Facebook group, just search for Parent Tween Connection, then you can actually ask questions live from our Facebook group. These are being recorded, obviously, so you can totally come back and check in later and watch the replays. If you do, just comment replay as you're watching so that we know that you were here. And Ashley, who is one of our trusted experts, she's been with us before, so I'm hoping that this isn't your first time seeing her, but if it is your first time seeing her, welcome. And Ashley, thank you for being our beta tester, our guinea pig. You are the one who's launching the roundtable with me.
Yeah, you know what? I'm so happy to be here, Clarissa. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so, just grateful that I'll be able to share some really, I think, important information for families today. And I'm totally happy to be the guinea pig. So we were actually talking about that before we hopped on today. I'm all good. Like whatever needs to happen. I'm very, easygoing in that regard. So yeah, super happy to be here and get started.
Awesome. So, this time of year, January, as a college admissions professional, you've been working with kids since beginning of junior year, beginning of senior year, maybe even before that. And I know the industry well enough to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So congratulations on surviving another application season.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's been a lot, this particular season. I've had quite a few kids, applying. I work with a lot of seniors, predominantly, but I do have quite a few juniors, and I also have, freshmen and even sophomores, who I work with as well. So, so going into, January, it's really important, especially when we're thinking about our sophomores and our juniors, what they need to be thinking about as they head into, their junior year, and then obviously into application season, in August when that really opens up.
Absolutely. So I know one of the things that we talk to kids a lot about in the college admissions process is that the way I describe it is there's kind of like three categories of things that colleges are looking at. Number one, your GPA. Number two, test scores. And I know we could have a whole other conversation on the state of tests and SATs and ACTs. So we're just going to leave that for another day, another conversation. But then the third bit is kind of like everything else in the application. And so I know one of the things that you're super focused on with students is their personal statement, because that's where they become human beings, not just the numbers that the GPA or the test scores indicate. And so I know you wanted to talk a bit, give some folks some insight on what is a personal statement? Where do I begin? How early should I begin? What should I include? All of that jazz. So first of all, what is a personal statement and what is it not?
Yeah, exactly. So a personal statement is really, honestly, a time for the student to shine and discuss an individual story. It could be an accomplishment, it could be a realization, it could be an attribute, an interest, a passion that really is unique or something that the student really loves and can express within this essay, but that also will provide them with an area to expand, right, on their learning, growth, or impact that they had while they were in high school, or even as a child, right, growing up. Because when you distill college down to its essential parts, that's really what it's about. And so I kind of want to just, go through that on my, presentation,
Sure.
and kind of discuss a little bit about what that means. So in terms of the prompts, in terms of a personal statement, it really kind of throws students sometimes when they have the 7 prompts and the last one says you can basically write an essay on a topic of your choice. Students are very used to having a specific set of rules, right? And then they have to follow those rules when they write an essay. So for example, it's a literary analysis or it's a research paper. They have a 5-paragraph essay. You need to make sure that they have, a thesis statement, a strong thesis that guides the rest of the essay with topic sentences, etc., right? And they need to cite their sources and all of that. So they're very used to doing that. And that's really, in the education system, what we emphasize, those skills, right? Because that's what they're going to need to do in college predominantly as well. And so, of course, we want to teach that. However, we don't really teach creative writing. And so there are classes you can take, of course, right? Students can do that as elective, they can go in extracurriculars, clubs, things like that. But it's not something that we really emphasize for the vast majority of students. So now all of a sudden, when they get into junior year and then into senior year when they're applying, we expect them to just know how to creatively write these amazing essays and then present them to colleges. And that's not the case, right? They need to be taught these things. And so that's one of the things that I will sometimes work with students on is I like to call it the rough draft.
Right, for sure.
If I say rough draft, students think it just needs to be done and just kind of edit it, right? Like maybe some grammar, punctuation stuff. But I call it a rough draft because it's the idea of a journal entry or a free write, right? Students just need to start writing. So the idea here is that we look at the prompts and we use them as guides, but we really ultimately can write about what we want. This is an exercise in our creativity, but it's also an exercise in understanding what the colleges want to see from us. They do not want to just have a regurgitation of your accomplishments, of your extracurriculars, of your GPA. They can see all of that on the application, right? So whether you're applying via the Common App, whether you're applying via the UC, the coalition, or even an individual application, most of them are going to have areas where you can put or include your activities, where you're going to put your grades, where you're going to put, leadership positions, things like that. So they already see that in another aspect of the application. Now, you can absolutely pull from, right, one of those and expand on it more, but as long as you have that sort of learning growth avenue, because that's really ultimately what college is about, and that's what the admissions officers want to see, is that you can reflect versus just report. Okay, so that's kind of the rundown, if you would say. So in terms of a college essay, right, we want to make sure that when we're looking at this, right, that we're looking at kind of an exercise that you can complete is, and this is kind of where I'll start with my students, is come up with 3 positive words that helps describe you, right? So this could be compassionate, this could be caring, determined, diligent, it could be stable, it could be trustworthy, loyal, right? So come up with 3 of those words. And what I always tell students to do is to really think about words that resonate with who you want to be, who you are. And these words are things that you can use to kind of create a theme, right, for your essay. So if your essay, like if you're like, things that really describe me, like I'm diligent, I'm loyal, I'm compassionate. Okay, so how have you taken those skills and how have you kind of used those, or how have you extended those attributes in various aspects of your life? Well, maybe there's a particular organization that you've participated in. Maybe you volunteered for a lot of years. Maybe you started a club, right? Or maybe you worked on a nonprofit or worked at a nonprofit and you utilized those skills. That could be a really good starting place to start writing your essay from, in terms of that learning and that growth that we can see from the essay. So that's a really important aspect. Yeah. The other thing that I always mention too is opening with a story or an anecdote. This is what we call an attention getting device. So that's the AGD that you see on the bottom. This is, so when I was in high school, I took competitive speech and debate forensics. And that was one of the things that they always talked about. And I had never even heard this concept before I entered into high school and took this class. And while I was in high school, right, when I was writing papers and stuff, they never talked about this because this is not a traditional, essay, right, that we would write. So an attention getting device can be a lot of different things, okay? It can be a joke. It can be a quote. It can be an opening or a particular section of a poem or even a story. But for a personal statement, a personal narrative is absolutely going to be the best bet that you can do in terms of, and you want to start in the action. That's really, I think, probably the biggest thing that I will tell students. So you don't just want to say, I woke up, there was the alarm clock, right? Like you want to say, as the alarm buzzed by my head, I slowly rolled over, hitting the snooze button, realizing today was one of the most important days of my life. That's a much better way to go into the story, because then what you're trying to do is really create that what's next, right? What happened to the student? Why was this important, right? So we can get into that. So the elements that we want to make sure that we include within any personal statement, and really what colleges are looking for, right, is that attention getting device, that element of creativity and that personal narrative. And then the actual realization, right? So like, what is it, what is an accomplishment or a realization or something that you have? And then discuss your why. Why should the college admissions officer who's reading this essay, why should they care? That I feel like is the biggest thing. What did you do? What was an impact? How did you grow? How is that going to facilitate further growth? How has this maybe motivated you, right? Because it could be a challenge that you overcame. and that's really something that is very important. And oftentimes students think that everything needs to be lollipops and rainbows. And I will tell you, that couldn't be further from the truth, right?
Right.
There's so much advice out there. And I don't say bad advice because I think people try. But there's so much advice out there about what you shouldn't write about that literally, if we listen to all of the advice about what you shouldn't write about, there literally would be nothing you could write about.
Exactly.
And it's frankly, it's very distressing because people, I literally had a student tell me the other day that their English teacher told them that they shouldn't write about theater because that's on their application, and it's just not something that's really going to provide them with a strong essay. And I said, well, how long have you been doing theater for? It's been 5, 6, 7 years you've been doing theater. It's a huge part of your life. The mom was talking about how there was a really excellent growth opportunity that the student experienced because of theater. They were able to come out of their shell. They were able to build confidence. And so I'm like, this is perfect, right? You open with how, maybe you were shy, timid, didn't really know what to do, right? Public speaking and performing is a really difficult thing for a lot of people. So if you were able to kind of work through that, how were you able to do that? And then provide that sort of context for the admissions officers.
So can I interject for a second?
Sure.
So one of the things that I've had a lot of students ask me over the years, if they've had a particularly challenging freshman year, right? Like a lot of kids struggle with that transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, or they just have things happen that year. Maybe that's the year that mom or dad got divorced, or maybe that's the year that a sibling was diagnosed with a disease or something like that. So what I'm hearing from you is there's no topic that's taboo as long as you speak to the impact it had and how you've grown from the experience.
Yes. And when you say no topic is taboo, there are a few things that I will tell students. One of the things that I say for students to stay away from are relationships, like romantic relationships while they're in high school, because it can really sort of turn into a my heart was broken, and like we've been there, we get that. What's something personally about just you, right? Like not necessarily your significant other in that particular situation, or what happened, or sort of the drama that existed around that, because most people have been through that, we understand, but we want something that's really going to provide the impact that you were able to create, or a realization that you were to have about yourself. And yes, sure, you absolutely can have growth from a breakup and things like that. But I tell students, I would recommend just kind of staying away from that. But ultimately, I have had students talk about just a variety of different topics. They've talked about social anxiety. They've talked about depression. They've talked about, overcoming a specific obstacle like a divorce, or even the death of a family member. The grieving process. They've talked about maybe struggling in school academically. Struggling socially. There's just so many different things. And so some people think like, oh, I can only talk about topics that are going to put me in the best possible, like, I will be the perfect student that's ever existed. And that's not what admissions officers want. They want it because you're going to face struggles in college.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? So they want to know that you can overcome those challenges in positive, functional, healthy ways, and that you learn something from the ones that you have experienced. Because ultimately, as a former teacher and educator myself, the whole point of our education system, right, is to ultimately prepare students to be productive members of society, whether that means they go off to college, whether that means, they join a skilled trade, they get a job, whatever it means for them, right, individually.
Right.
But that's our goal. And so the goal of that is also helping them be critical thinkers, helping them problem solve and solution seek, right? And so if we know that they're going to experience those challenges, and admissions officers know that as well. So having an essay that's really cuts deep and that's genuine and authentic is going to be much more well received than an essay that just really tries to regurgitate, hey, I was the student body president, I did all these wonderful things. It's like, well, okay, talk about a conflict that maybe you helped resolve, right? And what did you learn from that moment? Maybe it was involving you, right? What did you learn about yourself? Leadership, right? What did you learn about leading others around you? What are elements of a good leader? Those make for really good essays. So yes, you can absolutely take. So, in terms of divorce, right? That's a really, really important topic. I am a product myself of divorced parents, so I understand and empathize with students about how difficult it can be sometimes, right, to navigate that entire process, especially as a child, right? Because sometimes your parents are kind of in their own thing, right, dealing with their own trauma and drama and everything else, right? So as a kid, you're trying to process that. And it's sometimes, honestly, it's therapeutic and cathartic to get that out on paper. And so writing about it can really be important. And what did you learn, right? What did you learn about your family dynamic, yourself, how to overcome obstacles? What is an important life lesson that really resonated with you throughout the process?
Cool.
Yeah. So I always recommend writing down some ideas. This can be using a graphic organizer. This can be using an outline form. But I always recommend starting first. I usually recommend doing this on pen and paper. However, you can absolutely type stuff out as well. So if you have a Google Doc that you're working from, that's usually the primary mode or method that I work with my students with. And so we'll write some ideas down, or I'll even tell them, like, hey, jot some stuff down. If you're a very visual learner, a graphic organizer is perfect. So I actually have a brainstorming worksheet that I will be giving you the link to so that you can download that.
Awesome, cool.
Yeah, it has different graphic organizers in there. So students can print those off and they can actually write, or they can kind of take pieces of those graphic organizer and make it their own. But it can be as simple as just jotting down some ideas in an outline form. And I would say the biggest and most important aspect of this process is to just start writing. You want to make sure, like we talked about, it's the rough draft, which is that free write journal entry. This is the process that I work with my, one-on-one clients, where we discuss ideas, we talk about some topics, I give them some ideas like, hey, this would be good to maybe start with a narrative in this regard. Let's just start writing that, right? So we'll start with one paragraph. I say, let's write the personal narrative and the idea here, and then let's get one paragraph in. That's it, right? We are not trying to write the entire essay in one fell swoop. That's just
right.
I have some kids that can do that, and that's awesome. But that's not everybody. That's not most by far.
Not the norm.
Need to really work through the writing process. And that's why it's a process, right? Right. It's not like, students sometimes I don't know, I think, and I may be just, just kind of the way that we have them write in the education system. And so they think, and kind of how things are in the education system, where kind of the first time you do something, it needs to be good. And it's like, that's just not the writing process. There's so many steps because we want the writing to be the best it can be. And so that takes time. That takes time. It takes reflection to do that.
That actually brings up a question for me. Several of the comments that we have here, actually, Andrea Garcia, who's going to be another one of our speakers toward the end of our roundtable, has a significant history as an interpreter, specifically a medical interpreter. Her native language is Spanish. She speaks English fluently. And so she's done a lot of advocacy with families and whatnot over the years. So if we have, my ultimate question is, how much editing do we need to do versus, for example, if we have a student who is an English language learner, we want it to still be in their, like, representative of themselves and in their own manner of speaking. Where's the line on that? Like, how refined, edited, rewritten do we want to go?
Yeah, I mean, there's honestly a very fine line in terms of an authentic voice from the student versus just, something that is very, very polished and edited. And I always will opt for the more authentic voice. There absolutely, there needs to be no grammar or punctuation errors. So using particular words like vocabulary, things like that, that needs to be true to the student. But I would always recommend having a peer, a teacher, a trusted adult, parent, someone go over the essay and just make sure that there's not any glaring grammatical issues or spelling concerns or things like that, because that does stick out like a sore thumb to admissions officers. And so that is very, very important. But in terms of it being in their authentic voice, that is very important. And so you really want to make sure that, if someone goes over and they're adding in words. It was funny, like I had a student, and I put a suggestion, right, for a word replacement, and they commented below. They're like, this is you being a science teacher right here. This is, you know what I mean? Like, this is not and I kind of laughed because I was like, you're totally right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I kind of got in that, like, this is a better word for that. And it was, but it wasn't them. You know what I mean? And so it's like, yes, and like everybody does stuff like that, right? So it's important, for the student, for you to also, if you're working with a student on this, or if you're a parent, because I think that's one thing too, that sometimes parents will get very involved in the essay writing process. Where it's like, where does the student start and the parent start, and then where does everybody sort of end? So we want to make sure that it is obviously the student essay, but obviously helping them too. Like, hey, this, instead of putting biggest, right? Is there a better word that we could do? Or instead of putting nice, is there a better word? And that,
Right.
asking that or giving them some options, right? Or saying like, hey, these might be better. Like, let's, open a thesaurus, like, let's look through some of this stuff because, there are better ways to express ourselves. And that is important too, because we do want to show them obviously that we, have a strong command of, vocabulary and that we can progress through that. But authenticity is obviously the most important thing that you
Also, right. Cool. Thank you. Thanks for letting me interject.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so one of the, I think probably the biggest things that I see with my students, especially nowadays. So a lot of kids are on TikTok, right? That's a really just very prominent app. And there's a lot of advice on TikTok, and a lot of it comes from students. Students that are either in college or that are like seniors, and they're talking to their junior peers, right, via this app, and they're giving advice, and they will start talking about the essays that they wrote, right? And what students, I'm at least seeing, is a lot of them are trying to compare. So they're trying to say like, wow, like this person's personal statement was their topic was like amazing. I have nothing like that. There's no way that I can even compete with these personal statements that are out there. Yeah. And I always try to tell my students, there is nothing that you obviously can't write about. Like we said, there's a few little things, but there's really anything you want to write about. And it's your individual story. A personal statement is not about comparing or looking at somebody else's. It's about you, right? It's about your life. It's about you, what you want to express to the college admissions officer or officers that are reading these essays. Right. That is so, so important, right? If the committee's looking around and they've looked at your essay, what insight are they going to get into who you are as a person? And ultimately, like we talked about, those essential parts of college, which are the learning, growth, and the impact. So that's really what we want to make sure that we're doing. And that can be in any facet. It doesn't have to be some off-the-wall topic. It doesn't need to be. I mean, I had a student talk about nail polish one time in a personal statement, and they really talked about how they, enjoying the small things in life is something that was really important to them. And they were able to kind of, take larger, sort of life events and kind of, juxtapose them with nail polish, right? And it was beautiful, but it was about nail polish, And so it can literally be sort of some of the things that you wouldn't even think about can really make for wonderful, wonderful essays. That student got into Duke, by the way. So, So you don't need to have like some, philosophical, right? Like, just absolute, like we are just, the next, Einstein or something to be able to write a solid essay that students or that admissions officers really like. So please don't compare yourself, right? It needs to be authentic, and we're not trying to make it inauthentic by pulling what other people write about. The other thing, like we talked about, is kind of that introductory exercise where we looked at 3 words. Those really can be themes, right? So have you illustrated what you want officers to know? Like, is that a theme? Is that something that you've really been able to espouse? If you're loyal or you're diligent, have you made sure that that's something that they can actually see within the essay itself, which is really important. And then, like we talked about, writing process. So editing, proofreading, very important. Have multiple people read and reread, right? And make sure, run it through even like a software. I don't like those softwares. I think it's better. It's honestly better because, and like you could attest to this, when they're doing their SAT and ACT, they need to know grammar and punctuation rules anyways. So this is a great example of a way that you can really practice that in an applicable manner. And so I think that's very important. But really make sure that students are, there isn't any issues with that. And then the other thing too that I will always say, and this is something I learned just on a personal level from when I was in competitive speech and debate in high school, was reading things aloud can really make a huge impact on how that essay is coming across. Absolutely. So I always recommend reading it aloud to somebody too, so that they can give you feedback, is also really, really important. So, and like we talked about, that reflection versus reporting. So it's one thing to just say what you did. It's another to reflect on how that provided you with a learning, growth, or impact opportunity. And again, addressing why should they care, right? What have you learned? What were you able to do? What impact were you able to have? Or what further impact do you want to have? Sure. That's really important as well. So if you work with a nonprofit or you work as a volunteer and you've really, learned that you have a passion for a particular area, how are you going to continue that? Right. And why is it important to you? What's the motivation behind that? And that's really, really important. So just to kind of sum up, I have my contact information here, but I also have a free workbook. It is on my webpage. It's on the blog and free resources tab of my webpage. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's a download button. You just literally, there's no email or anything. You can literally just it's totally free. And you can just download it. For families, it's just a completely free resource. And it's a complete workbook that goes through what we discussed in terms of brainstorming. There's also sections and pages for notes, and there's also graphic organizers that can be helpful as well, but that can kind of just give students an idea of where to start.
Awesome. And so one of the things that I can say for those of you watching or, catching a replay, if you don't know, I've been an SAT and ACT coach for 24 years, and people like Ashley and, she's one of our trusted experts. We've got a couple of other folks who are also in the college admission space. They work together. They refer clients to each other to find right fits and such. They are a huge resource, a huge asset for helping families navigate this process. The college admissions world is overwhelming for a lot of folks, especially if, parents are more of my age range than Ashley's age range, where things have changed a little bit more since we went through. Or if you went to a college in a different country, or maybe you didn't go to college, there's a lot involved, and having somebody like Ashley on your team can help take a lot of the stress out, and she can give you just like general conversation, general guidelines about what timelines you need to be looking at, all the way down to, like we talked today, researching or developing rather different application essays, finding the colleges that students want to go to, whittling those names down. Do you want to go to Duke because you actually want to go to Duke because you like the campus and it's a school that you're going to be happy and successful at? Or do you want to go to Duke because the name of the school, those kinds of things. And so that's actually what Ashley and I are going to be talking about during our exclusive interview or exclusive conversation for Parent Tween Village. If you're not familiar with Parent Tween Village, it is our family community. It is a membership program, and all of our guests for the roundtable are going to be offering exclusive insight just from members of Parent Tween Village. And today, Ashley and I are going to be talking about how to build a college list. So if you haven't joined Parent Tween Village, you can pop over to our website. It's right at the bottom of the banner right there at parenttweenconnection.com. And you can subscribe and catch the replay of our conversation with Ashley today, and then also be able to pop in for live conversations with our other folks as they come for the rest of the month. Ashley, thank you for being my guinea pig today and for joining me as we explore this. We're going to go ahead and say thank you, and we're going to end this broadcast, and we're going to pop over into the Parent Tween Village private Facebook group and continue our conversation there.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day, y'all.